You read too many novels by Fleming. Oh, dear me. I'm terribly sorry. The Datsun 260C, is it a Cedric? Is it a Gloria? Confusing? Why, let's find out, shall we? Datsun! Hey!
Here we are with anchors tying us to what we'll call home, even if the sight of it has not yet touched our eyes. And here we are and we're together, even if we are apart. And we're together when we're together, something big is happening among us. It's not as if we don't have to deal with our shortcomings. It's not as if we don't have to wipe away the tears.
So welcome to a very special episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews, because if you've seen this, we've hit 5,000 subscribers. Yes, viewers, somehow 5,000 people think it's worth being informed when videos go live and me sort of mumbling to myself in various different types of cars in sometimes less than competent ways. But this is a 1973 Datsun 260C. It's a very, very rare car. They weren't common when they were new. I mean, most people would have just gone out and bought them like a Granada. But it is just an incredible thing. It's also known as the Cedric in a lot of other countries. A lot of other names: 200C, 220C, 240C, 280C, and the 300C. But generally these days they're known as Cedrics, the 230 series. The Gloria was also similar to this. It was a bit more of an upmarket version of this, with a bit of a reduced engine life. We're not sure we got the Glorias over here actually. Nissan at this time, or Datsun, they were still coming to terms with the fact that they sort of inherited the Prince Motor Company in about 1966, and so they had quite a confusing lineup of cars they sold around the world. The 230 series, which was a third generation Cedric, was introduced in 1971. It only lasted till 75. So on the sort of kind of longevity of the model, it wasn't particularly long lasting. The first Cedric was introduced in 1960. So this was quite a different type of car from the first generation and the second generation. Although I've only seen the second generation Cedric once, which was at the Retro Rides Weekend in Goodwood back in May. The engine options for the Cedric, or the 200 series ending with a C, were a 2-litre 4-cylinder with 92 horsepower. Then there was a 2 to 6-cylinder with either 115 or 125 horsepower. Then there was the 240C. Now this was actually sold in this country before the 260C, and that generated 128 horsepower. It was the same engine as this, just to a slightly smaller capacity, which is also the same engine as actually in that Datsun Laurel that I drove, Datsun stroke Nissan Laurel, because the car had both badges on it, that I drove in the northeast on Sensible Second-Hand Classics back in August. And then right at the top there was this 2.6 litre with 140 horsepower. In South Africa they had slightly different power outputs and things like that, but this is 140 in this particular car. There are also some diesels, but as usual, due to controversial government legislation and all kinds of other reasons, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. There weren't really kind of trim options for the Cedrics and the 260C, unless you count the fact you could just buy a Gloria, which was better trimmed. But this has got a lot of equipment from 1973. You've got an electric aerial. We've got actually 3 stereos in this car, which is the most I've ever seen in any car. It is just a remarkable car. Just a mixture of kind of Americana translated into Japanese, and just loads of quirks from the early 70s. Lots and lots of chrome. Mirrors which are actually physically on the wings. They're wing mirrors on the wings, which I thought would be completely useless, but actually they're all right. The seats are very, very comfortable in this car as well. The steering wheel is nice and large, and you kind of need that because there is no power steering in this car at all. I don't even know if it was an option on these. Maybe it was. Certainly it's an option I would have specified myself if I'd bought one of these cars in 1973. This is actually a UK market car as well, which is even more remarkable. I didn't even know until Stuart, who owns this car, and a massive collection of other Datsuns and Nissans from the 70s through to the late 90s. I didn't even know they sold these over here until Stuart told me. 0 to 60 of this car is I don't even know. It's not. I don't think it's even relevant really. What I'm noticing more is actually as we go to the speed limit here in the New Forest, which is 40, the steering wheel's getting very, very, very light because there is no power assistance at all. So it's just how the steering kind of comes out. It is a little bit large. It reminds me of something like a Mark IV Zephyr, and those were a bit like this, a sort of aircraft carrier style bonnets, which are really, really long. Although this is a bit, I personally think, a better proportioned car. I think it looks much, much better than one of those, which are always a bit odd really. But of course they were rivals. You could buy in 72, you could buy a 240C, and then later in 72 they went to a 260C, or a Zephyr or a Zodiac at the same time. I feel though like I am the chairman of some kind of Japanese company, and I'm driving to work in my 260C, because this makes me feel like a sort of chairman of the board. You know, there's no feeling in here that you want to go particularly fast. You know, Nissan or Datsun did sell a car with this engine that was a sports car, the S30 series of Z cars, Fairlady Z, 240Z, 260Z, 280Z, depending on where you were in the world. And we might have one of those coming up on the channel at some point soon, or you might have already seen that. And you know, I am looking forward to it. This though, it reminds me very much of the fact that in Japan in the 70s, they were very, very much influenced still by American styling, as we were to a certain extent in Europe as well. You only have to look at the Mark III Cortina to see that influence. But this is like a large American full-size luxury car, but just sort of shrunk down to more sensible proportions. It's still massive. It's not as big as an American car would be, but everything in here, from the sort of fake wood to the lashings of chrome, it you know, makes me think that, you know, they really thought that Americana was the way forward. The engine is remarkably quiet. It's very smooth. There's no way I'd particularly want to maybe go into any crosswinds in this because of the upright shape and profile of the car, but it's actually a little bit easier to handle than I thought. The only thing is this steering is, I don't know whether this is a steering box or whether it's rack and pinion, but it's a steering box, and so it feels very, very vague. Now, steering boxes can be good. There are certain cars with steering boxes that are very good, but in this kind of era and in this sort of car, there's not the sort of sense of communication you get with rack and pinion system like you find in the 260Z. But I am very, very much enjoying this, and it just remains me to say thanks to Stuart. So thanks, Stuart. View it. Let's now go somewhere and take a look at this remarkably rare Datsun in a bit more detail.
And here we are with anchors tying us to what we'll call home, even if the sight of it has not yet touched our eyes. And here we are and we're together, even if we are apart, and we're together when we're together. Something big is happening.
I do like pulling on umbrella handbrakes. They have a very satisfying feel. That was most enjoyable. I do feel like I have reached the top of the corporate ladder in Japan. Anyway, let's have a look now at the 260C's more practical side and take a look at the boot. Like a lot of cars of this era, the 260C uses a separate key for the ignition and the doors and boot. It's not actually not a push button boot this, you just have to very carefully sort of gently move it. Like this, there we go. Self-supporting boot struts, and you can tell the paint on this car is actually original because there's a sticker just here to show you where you should be storing your jack handle tyre stopper, whatever that is, jack and tool bag just down there. If we lift up the boot carpet and this bit of, I think it's a bit of foam or something here. Actually, that's not foam, that's horsehair or something. We find we've got the original Japanese tyre from 1973, and this also confirms that this car's got 14-inch wheels on it. It's a very, very good shape actually, this, and unlike some cars of this era where the spare tyre is very prominent on the boot floor, it's actually very flat. I mean, this load lip is enormous, but you do get to admire the amount of chrome work on these rear lights. The two reversing lights, although one of them's not working today, and this is the original number plate from the dealership in Bristol where this car was bought, with the raised lettering on it. Also a nice little chrome tipped exhaust down there. One thing you mustn't do is put the keys anywhere near the boot, because otherwise you'd be in trouble. Although headroom in the back of this car is really good, the knee room isn't quite as good as I'd imagine. I've had to slide this forward a little bit to make my entrance a bit easier. However, these seats are really comfortable. Acres and acres of vinyl, and I think this is some kind of cloth as well. Big rear seat pockets, and something I've not seen in a car from the 70s before. Those are radio controls for one of the 3 stereos this car is fitted with. Also on the door panel, it's all sort of vinyl, and we've got the smoothest operating wind-up windows I've ever seen in my entire life. There are actually lights here for the rear passengers, and they work. And there's a rear armrest. It's a patterned rear armrest. Look at this amazing luxury. It's very, very stiff to operate, but look at this blue vinyl. If this doesn't scream to you 1970s Japanese car, then I don't really know what does. The blue carpet in here is remarkable too, and just above the central transmission tunnel, this is a rear-wheel drive car after all, is a little ashtray, which of course you're going to need on your way to all those corporate meetings. This car is actually fitted with an aftermarket Tudor Webasto sunroof, I think you'd call it. It looks like the car's got a vinyl roof, but this is actually something that moves forward and back. I'm not going to actually touch this because the idea of me breaking something like this, especially on a day like today, is a little bit alarming, so we won't do that. Instead, we've got these grab handles, which look suspiciously like the same ones that I've seen in my mother's old Volvo 240, but I don't think they are. After all, we're in, in Japan in '73. No rear seat belts, of course, because they weren't even compulsory to fit in the back of cars in this country until about 1987. So you just sit back and enjoy a luxurious ride to the board meeting. This has to be one of the quirkiest interiors I think I've ever seen in any car we filmed on Tweed Jacket Reviews. Straight ahead of me, you'd expect to find a rev counter, and there isn't one. That's absolutely fine though, because we've got an automatic gearbox in this car. There were manuals available, of course, as well. The heating and ventilation controls are actually in a really, really convenient place. They're right at the top of the dashboard here. And if you want even more ventilation, there's a little pull down here by your right knee, which you could think is the bonnet release, but that just lets more air through. I think it's this vent at the top here. Tiny, tiny little air vents in this car, really small. The wiper controls are right over here, and this tiny little switch, which only has a very small symbol for wipers on here, and the light controls are on this pull lever, which isn't particularly uncommon for cars of this era to have it like that. But if you want to put the side lights on, you put that on, and then you push the indicator stalk on the right hand side forward like this, which is a bit weird. This is a control here for the rear heated window. This car came with a standard rear heated window, which wasn't a given at all at this era. Also, we've got the 3 radios. We've got one that actually operates with the electric aerial, which is fun. It's an AM radio, and below here there's like a panel light here, which I can put on by using that switch. This also has an auto seek function, which I didn't really realise was possible to have in any radio of this era, let alone one in a car. Auto reverse cassette deck down here, and then an 8-track Hitachi one just down here. I don't know, apart from the standard one just there, what era these two particularly are. I presume they're late 70s or early 80s, but the owner of this car, who had it for many, many years, did fit quite a few accessories, such as the Webasto roof here, so he probably put those in at some point too. Lots and lots and lots of fake wood, as you'd expect. I'm not going to sound the horn because we're in a bit of a public place here, so I'm not going to do that. The controls are nice and easy to operate when you know where they are. This is the dash illumination here. That's the choke lever, umbrella handbrake just here. I don't know what that's for. Maybe that's for putting a phone using sat nav or something. Very forward thinking. Bonnet release is just down here. There's a little switch there, which is something to do with the 8-track, I think. So once you get used to where things are, it's not too bad. It's just a little bit sort of random. Let's see if my secret mission documents fit in the glove box. No. No, they don't. You know, viewers, I was getting really, really optimistic about this car in terms of its potential for spy work, but unfortunately we're just going to have to put it down on that shelf there. Centre of the car, there is this lid storage cubby. It's quite a large centre console for a car of this time, and that's very good for storing any more sort of secret supplies you might have. Little thing down here, I presume that's for coins or something. And then this is only a 3-speed auto, which you know, is pretty typical for a car of this era. Colour-coded sun visors here, and one of them's got a little mirror that looks like it's been glued on or something. That's strange. As is this light for the front passengers, which is a very interesting shape. There's the Tudor Webasto sunroof, which I'm not going to touch because I don't want to break it. And then this steering wheel, I'm glad it's quite big because, well, it's got no power steering. In conclusion then, what do I think of this really rather lovely Datsun 260C? At the time, people were driving around in things like Ford Granadas, Rover P6s, something like that. And this is nothing like those cars. It has a character all of its own. Whether you like that or not, it really depends. I mean, the car's quite soft to drive, it's quite quiet, it's quite roomy for the time. But really, with prices of these rising when they come on the market and very, very few left, maybe what I said to you is academic, although that's really up to you. Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Well, well, well. It looks like nobody in your family is a rank amateur. Thank you for watching this episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews. I source cars for people on a professional basis. To find out more, please visit the links in the description below. Thank you.
Here we are and we're together, even if we are apart, and we're together when we're together. Something big is happening.